Louder than they expected, this isn't just a story about winning a debate. It's about redefining the rules of the room. Zariah James didn't walk into Rosebridge High's debate club looking to fit in. She walked in demanding to be heard. And for that, they labeled her, mocked her, dismissed her as just another loud black girl. They didn't see a strategist, they didn't see a scholar, they saw a stereotype. But what none of them realized was that Zariah's voice wasn't a flaw. It was a weapon. Sharpened by survival, fueled by truth, and destined to shake even the most prestigious rooms in the nation, and as you'll see in this story, the very volume they tried to silence became the echo they could never forget. The loud girl walks, and the first time Zariah James stepped into the Rosebridge High debate room, the air itself seemed to recoil. It wasn't her voice that made heads turn, it was her presence. She wore a mustard yellow hoodie, oversized hoop earrings, and carried herself like she had already won something no one else even knew was up for grabs. The room fell quiet, not out of respect, but confusion. Then she spoke. Is this where we talk truth or just trade big words and bigger egos? The snickers came quickly. A few seniors exchanged eye rolls. One girl whispered just loud enough for the others to hear. Oh, great. Another loud black girl trying to be Angela Davis. Zariah heard it. She always heard it. She just never let it show. She dropped into the nearest chair, loud bang and all, and began leafing through the materials like she'd been part of the team for years. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't uncertain. She was ready, but they couldn't see that. All they saw was a stereotype they had already decided to dismiss. She was too loud, too dramatic, too much. And even before she spoke her first formal argument, she'd already been assigned a label she hadn't chosen, but one she would later own. Mistaken identity, they said. She was all bark, no substance. The kind of girl who talked too fast, felt too deeply, and argued more from emotion than intellect. Her laugh was too unfiltered, her opinions too raw, her hair too wild, her voice too strong. She was the disruption to their polished elite bubble. In the corridors, whispers turned into running jokes. She probably thinks yelling is a strategy. She'll get crushed the moment she faces someone with actual sources. Some even mocked her to her face, but always with that condescending smile, the one that says, "We're not scared of you. We just don't take you seriously." But what they never understood was that Zariah's volume wasn't a lack of control. It was history, it was heritage. She came from a family where silence meant surrender, and she had never learned how to bow. They mistook her fire for chaos, her emotion for weakness, her culture for noise, and that was their first and biggest mistake. Because while they were busy mocking, Zariah was listening, watching, sharpening. Her silence wasn't retreat, it was a coiled spring, and when the moment finally came, when she'd open her mouth on that debate stage for real, every syllable would echo like thunder. They had mistaken identity for inability. They'd learn soon enough. Volume was never the problem, vision was. The first shockwave had happened during a Tuesday mock debate, one no one even thought twice about. The topic was criminal justice reform, and Zariah had been paired against Derek Linwood, a senior honor student and two-time state finalist. He was sharp, smug, and wore his team jacket like a crown. The timer buzzed. Derek began, his voice calm and calculated, quoting think tanks and federal reports, laying out his case with practiced elegance. Then came Zariah. She didn't fumble with notes. She didn't even check her paper. She looked directly at Derek, then at the audience, and started with a simple, piercing line. Let's stop talking about the system and start talking about what it actually does to people who look like me. Her tone was fierce, but focused. Each word hit like a gavel. She cited real-world statistics, yes. But more than that, she wove in lived experience, stories from her own family, her community, her uncle wrongfully arrested at 16. Her classmate expelled over a misunderstanding that would have been overlooked in a richer district. The room was frozen. When Derek tried to interrupt, she didn't flinch. Don't talk over me, she said without raising her voice. You had your turn. Let me finish telling the truth. By the end, even Coach Emerson leaned forward in his chair, visibly stunned. No one laughed that time. The coach takes notice. Coach Emerson had seen a lot over the years. He'd trained quiet prodigies and silver-tongued geniuses, but never had he seen someone like her. Zariah's words weren't rehearsed. They were relentless, not just passionate, but precise. Her emotions didn't drown her arguments, they drove them. After the mock debate, he pulled her aside. "You know," he said slowly, "you didn't just beat Derek, you demolished him." Zariah raised an eyebrow, cautious, wasn't trying to make friends. Coach chuckled. "Good, you won't make many in debate anyway, not if you're doing it right." From that day forward, Zariah wasn't just another voice in the room. Coach Emerson began feeding her tougher topics, pairing her with the best on the team, pushing her harder than anyone else. He saw what no one else had dared to see, raw brilliance beneath the defiance. And while the team still rolled their eyes when she spoke too loud or clapped back with too much flair, they started noticing something they couldn't deny. Zariah wasn't lucky. She wasn't loud, she was lethal, and she was just getting started. The road to crimson. The Rosebridge debate team had never even sniffed the Harvard Invitational. Not in the last 10 years, at least. It was the Mount Everest of high school debating, the domain of elite prep schools, legacy kids, and future senators in training. So when Coach Emerson posted the qualifying results on the whiteboard, the room stood still. Rosebridge, qualified, debate pair, Malcolm Reed and Zariah James. Gasps, groans, shock. Malcolm was expected. He was quiet, brilliant, a logic machine in a tie. But Zariah, seriously, someone whispered, "She's going to yell her way through Harvard." But Coach Emerson just smiled. "You want a safe pair? Pick someone else. You want to win? Watch her burn the place down." With facts. For Zariah, it wasn't just an opportunity, it was proof that all those nights studying policy briefs in her bedroom, all those hours she'd spent reading court rulings and learning the language of privilege, had led to this moment. She wasn't just the girl who talked loud anymore. She was going to Harvard, and she wasn't going as a tourist. She was going to compete. Crimson Lions in the final ring after surviving rounds against Dalton Prep and Exeter Academy, two of the most polished, resource-rich schools on the circuit. Rosebridge had done the unthinkable. They were in the final round. The opposing team, Harvard Westlake Honors, coached by none other than Professor Saul Winthrop, a real Harvard law professor known for training national champions. Their suits were custom, tailored. Their notes color-coded, their introductions opened like published TD Talks. Zariah took one look at them, then leaned over to Malcolm. "They came dressed to bury us." Malcolm swallowed hard. "We came to resurrect the truth." The topic was announced: National Security vs. Civil Liberties in Modern America. Zariah's eyes lit up. This wasn't just a policy question, it was personal. She lived in a world where helicopters hovered low and rights were fragile, where security didn't always mean safety, and civil liberties were negotiable depending on your zip code. As the Harvard team prepared their polished opening, Zariah simply closed her eyes. She wasn't intimidated. She was ignited, because this time she wasn't just defending a point, she was defending her reality. Fire meets ice on the Harvard stage. The final round began under the sharp glow of auditorium lights. The Harvard Westlake team took the podium first. Two polished prodigies who spoke like diplomats and moved like chess players. Their opening was textbook. Organized, articulate, and flawlessly rehearsed. Then Zariah stepped forward, no stack of color-coded note cards, no pre-rehearsed smile, just a single folded paper, her natural hair proud and untouched, and a voice that could split stone. "You say national security is worth sacrificing liberties. I say, whose liberties are you willing to sacrifice? Because from where I come from, we've been the sacrifice." Silence, then stillness. Zariah didn't quote obscure white papers. She quoted reality. She spoke of surveillance in black neighborhoods, of racial profiling, of families broken apart by policies designed to protect others. She linked legislation to lived experience, data to injustice, headlines to history. The Harvard team countered with clean policy frameworks and Supreme Court precedent. but for every abstract point they made, Zariah responded with a truth they couldn't rebut. She wasn't just speaking, she was unmasking the conversation, and as the final bell rang, it was clear to everyone watching, Harvard brought strategy, Zariah brought soul. When the system stares back as the judges prepared their verdict, one of Harvard's speakers, confident all day, finally looked shaken. Zariah hadn't just challenged their arguments, she had made them question their foundations. The judges began whispering. One of them, a civil rights attorney, nodded slowly as if still hearing Zariah's words echoing in her ears. Even Professor Winthrop, arms crossed and silent for most of the debate, leaned back with a faint smirk, like he had just witnessed a prophecy fulfilled. Then came the moment that made everything stop. The Harvard boy tried a final procedural rebuttal, something petty and technical, citing a misstep in citation. Zariah turned toward him, took one step closer, and leaned into the mic without raising her voice. "You want to talk about formatting while I'm talking about families torn apart by drones and raids? You want precision? Fine, here's a stat. Black Americans are 3 times more likely to be surveilled in high-crime zones, yet twice as likely to be victims, not perpetrators. Let's talk about that." Math, dead silence, even Malcolm, calm, quiet Malcolm, couldn't help but breathe. She just shut down Harvard, not with volume, not with rage, with truth, and the undeniable rhythm of a voice that had always been told it was too much, now proving it was just enough to shake the system. The loudest silence of all the room had been a battleground just moments ago, but now it was silent, no whisper, no shuffle, no movement, just the aftermath of Zariah's closing statement lingering in the air like smoke after a fire. The head judge stood for the best speaker of the year, a pause the kind that carries weight. Zariah James, Rosebridge High, gasps, then thunderous applause. Even some of the Harvard Westlake students clapped, begrudgingly at first, then genuinely, as if recognizing they'd just lost to something bigger than a competitor. They had lost to a force of nature. Zariah didn't cry, she didn't gloat. She stood still, eyes scanning the crowd, and gave a slow nod. This wasn't about a trophy, it was about being heard. It was about walking into a room that wasn't built for her, and owning it anyway. Coach Emerson grinned like a proud father. Malcolm shook her hand like a soldier to a general, and as she left the stage, someone from the audience shouted what everyone else was thinking. That girl didn't just win the debate, she changed it. A seat at the Crimson Table 2 weeks later, a letter arrived in a crisp Harvard envelope. Not a rejection, not an invite to apply, a request to MS. Zariah James from Harvard Law Speech and Advocacy Program subject. Guest coach invitation, summer session. Zariah stared at the letter, hands trembling. She wasn't just being welcomed into the room, she was being asked to lead in it. The girl they once called too loud had just been given a seat at the most exclusive table in the country, not because she softened herself, not because she conformed, but because she stayed exactly who she was. At the next Rosebridge debate meeting, Coach Emerson taped the letter on the wall beside her championship plaque. Below it, he wrote, "Let them mock you for being loud, because when the world finally listens, you'll be the only one left speaking." And so Zariah's echo lived on. Not just in debate rooms, but in boardrooms, classrooms, and courtrooms. Because they once mocked the loud black girl, but she silenced Harvard. Let them keep talking. In the end, Zariah didn't just silence Harvard's best. She silenced the doubt they had planted. She silenced the voices that said she was too emotional, too loud, too much, and she did it without changing who she was, without dimming her fire, without trimming her voice to fit their comfort. The same girl who walked into debate club and was mocked for her presence, left that world with Harvard's invitation in hand, and the entire room standing on its feet. Let them mock you for being loud, because one day that same voice they tried to quiet will be the only one that echoes in every room that ever tried to shut you out, and just like Zariah, you'll walk in as too much and leave as more than enough.